Read to the Gospel according to Mark, as we look at chapter 9, verse 30, 31, and 32 this morning. Three short verses. These are the verses that one would read to hurry up and get to the next major point. We're going to pause here because I believe that as we talk about overcoming the hurdles of spiritual powerlessness, I think it's times and passages like these that help us to understand the importance of really being plugged in to Jesus. We're talking about undergoing intensive training and preparation. Now, the reason why this is very a valuable lesson for us is because Jesus once gave a parable. He gave a parable of the wise builder. You familiar with that? Yeah. The wise builder who built his house on a rock. Yeah. Now the reason that it's significant is because it illustrates the importance of building on a proper foundation. Right? Yes. Woe unto us if we build our house on sand. Notice the house that is built on a rock or on a solid foundation may look just like the other house. Right. But this house is able to withstand the test of time. Now I have my green light on, so it must be in the control room. And so we know that as we go through life, each and every one of us, this is for you right now, and for me. As we go through life, we are going to encounter challenges. Am I right about it? That's right. We're going to run into obstacles, stumbling blocks, and hurdles throughout our lives. Therefore, we must prepare today for the challenges of tomorrow. That being said, and that being the case, my purpose today is simply to stress the importance of intensive training. See, there are different levels of teaching. That's when we have kids' church. We want to make sure that we are, giving biblical truths in a way that they can receive it. That's right. And so as we grow and mature, we're now able to take more substantive training. The Apostle Paul once said to the church of Corinth, he said, I desire, to teach you on the more weightier matters. I want to give you meat, but you are still at a point where you can only handle milk. That's right. And he referred to them as children. He uses the word not brephos. He used the word nepios. He meant, in other words, you are childish and still carnal, and you need to be matured and brought up to speed on some things. Because there are some trying times that are coming down the road, and you have to be prepared today to take on the challenges of your tomorrow. Amen. And so it is in this text. Because Jesus, as he stresses the importance of special, intensive training and preparation, I believe believers must undergo this kind of teaching in order to be effective witnesses. We all want to be a witness, right? We all want to be able to shine for the Lord. That's right. Well, if that is the case, we must be people who are able to submit ourselves to what the Holy Spirit wants to communicate to us, that he may ultimately communicate through us. That's right. And so today we're here. My objective is that we would reconsider our approach to spiritual maturity and awareness, in order that we can take full advantage of every opportunity to glorify God. We say we glorify God how? Through serving others. But we have to be equipped to properly and thus effectively serve. If we're not properly equipped to serve others, how then do we glorify God? Nor do we have the gall to say we are glorifying God when we shrink back and miss or neglect opportunities to stand and be a witness for God. Every day of our lives, God gives us opportunity. But only those who have their spiritual senses so in tune will be able to recognize and then take advantage of those opportunities as they present themselves. And it all has everything to do with your preparedness. With your preparedness. Not only to take advantage of, but even to recognize those opportunities as they present themselves. And so today, I want to talk about, something that all of us ought to be doing. And that is preparing for your future. Amen. You got to be prepared for your future. Because guess what? Your future is here. Every day is preparation for your tomorrow. Amen. And tomorrow is right around the corner. That's right. Now in our text, I want to give you three things. The first thing we have to understand, since we have already recognized, we can all settle on the fact that we need spiritual preparation. Can we say that? Yeah. But then what are the requirements? See, one thing is for me to say, I want to be spiritually strong. I want to be spiritually fit. But I do no spiritual exercise that's going to result in my spiritual fitness. Amen. If that is the case, the reverberating question then comes back to us is, do you really want to be fit? Okay? Let's keep this on the real. Let's say I want to go ahead and I want to, take off a few love handles. I'm not saying anything to anybody. I want to take off a few love handles. Well, then there's a gym right around across the street. Now you are here. Now the gym is like right here. Short distance. But there is a shorter, maybe a longer distance that needs to be traveled first. See, there are about 6 inches between these ears. And I get to deal with the space, this 6-inch space. In other words, I have to make up my mind that I'm going to do. Amen. I don't care how far or how close the gym is. Amen. I need to track that 6-inch distance. And that can be the longest distance. Amen. Because, if we don't make up in our mind, then we're never going to make the track or make the effort to do what we say we want to do. Amen. Okay? Amen. This is not a New Year's resolution. We're early for that. But the point is, we have to make sure that we have a determined mind. And therefore, we must make the necessary preparation today for what lies ahead on tomorrow. Amen. Does that make sense? Yes. Well, then, if it does, we can proceed. Notice with me, if you will, spiritual preparation requires time alone with Jesus. Amen. Yes, it does. If I look at verse 30 again, we're able to see they departed thence. So in other words, they departed from Caesarea Philippi, right? They departed from there and passed through Galilee. And he would not that any man should know it. Well, I think that's interesting. See, the journey to the cross. See, when they went to, going through Galilee was a formality. They were not going to Galilee as much as they were going through Galilee. Sure. See, there was an appointment. Everybody open up your calendar right now, your appointment book, and you can find out what your schedule is for the upcoming days and weeks. Well, on Jesus' book, the appointment book had nothing to do with Galilee. His appointment book had everything to do with Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. Not because of Jerusalem being a great metropolitan area and we're going to go to Jerusalem, we're going to have some R&R. No. He had an appointment with the cross, which necessitated him going to Jerusalem. So he had to go through Galilee in order to get to Jerusalem. So the journey to the cross demanded that Jesus continuously teach his disciples. Oh yeah, because when you get to Jerusalem, there's going to be a chain of events that will rock their world. See some things going on in your life. You may not even know there's a storm on the horizon. But when that storm comes, it will rock your world. And if you're not prepared, if you're not grounded, it can blow your house apart.
Amen. That's right. That's right.
His disciples needed some special time with him because of the significance of what lay ahead. The closer, if you watch this thing, the closer that Jesus got to Jerusalem, the more intense he began to step up his argument about his impending death.
That's right.
Notice the timeline, if you will. As they were going along the coast of Caesarea Philippi, when Jesus asked them that very, very popular question, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Right? And they began to offer answers or explanation to the query. And some said you are Moses, and some said you are Elijah, and some said you are, some other prophet. And then Jesus narrowed them down and asked them the pointed question, what about you? I understand what others say, but what about you? And that's when Peter came and very loquacious fellow here as he was, he said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Remember that? And right after that, Jesus began to talk very succinctly and very pointedly about his death. And they couldn't handle it. As a matter of fact, Peter kind of arrested him and said, come on over here, Jesus. You must need a cold towel on your head. Something's wrong. Because he said, we're not going to let you help. And he said, get behind me, Satan. Yeah. Remember that? And notice the dynamic presentation here. Jesus takes 3 of his disciples and they go up to a mountain. Peter, James, and John, more specifically. And as they were there, they beheld something that was glorious. Jesus was there, and he began to have a brilliance and a radiance that just shine or shone. He glowed. Right? And then if that wasn't enough, the Bible said that he was joined by Moses, the great lawgiver, and Elijah, the great prophet. And they began to communicate with him concerning the events that were sure to follow. And when the disciples beheld that, they couldn't contain themselves. Have you ever been in a situation where something happens, you don't know what to say? You just put out something. and one of the disciples said, Lord, it's good for us to be here. And notice, if you look at one text, as they were preparing to leave, that's when he spoke up and said that. They didn't want them to leave. That we'll build a house for all three of them. So they had no conception of Jesus leaving them. Let us build a tabernacle, one for Moses, one for Elijah, and one for you, Jesus. We want you to remain with us. For the Bible said that Jesus, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. In John 1:1, and verse 14 says, and the Word became flesh and tabernacled and dwelt among us. He pitched his tent with us. And they didn't want him to leave. Now, notice as they descended from the mountain, in all of his splendor and glory, there was a commotion. We talked about this on last week. There was an argument that had taken place. Or they were in the midst of an argument. Because there was a young man who brought his son. He brought his child to Jesus, and Jesus wasn't there. He was on the mountain with Peter, James, and John. But there were 9 other disciples who were still there. And so the Bible says, the man in his argument, he said, I brought my son who had the devil. He had an evil spirit. I brought him to your disciples that they might cure him or heal him, and they could not. Right. And because of their ineffectiveness in ministry, it opened the door for debate and argument. That's right. Sometimes we get in arguments, because people have an expectation of those who wear the name of Christ to act like Christ. Right? And so therefore, when they come looking for Jesus and they see you, do they look at it? Oh, I found Jesus in you, or they keep on looking? And because we don't simply represent like we're supposed to represent, we have to fall back on debate and argument and trying to hold our position on all kind of stuff. We can argue doctrinal points and all that kind of stuff, but the bottom line, do I see Jesus in you? Amen. Jesus comes on the scene. We know we're not going to it a lot, but Jesus comes on the scene, and Jesus cast the evil spirit out of the man. And the man and the disciples, notice the pride of the disciples, they didn't say nothing. They didn't want to be fronted off. But when they got back to the house, when they were behind closed doors, they said, let's get it, Jesus. How come we couldn't do that? Well, you should have been able to do that. Remember the limited commission? When I gave you power over the unclean spirits, I gave you power over sickness and disease so that you could properly represent me. Every believer has been endued with power. He said, this one don't come out except by prayer. Some manuscripts add fasting, and so I kind of dealt with fasting and prayer, but really by prayer. See, your faith, it's faith in God's ability is what is potent and powerful. Prayer is your connection into the power supply. Fasting is like I don't want to say, sometimes you got to jumpstart something. Yeah. To be closer in your communion through prayer, you need to make sure that that's your top priority. So therefore I engage in fasting so I can strengthen my line of communication with the power supply. And so he said, you got to be connected to the vine if you want to bear some fruit. And so here we are today. All of the excitement, all of the commotion, all of the attention that was being stirred up by the good works of Jesus. But now they depart because they are on a journey that demands continuous teaching and preparation. The closer he got to Jerusalem, the more intense he became in his teaching about his death and his resurrection. So he needed, sometimes it's hard for you to engage in certain kinds of teaching because there's too much noise. Right. Folk have other things on their plate. And they can come and sit in front of you and hear every word you say, but miss your message. That's right. And so, he knew that the storms of life were going to be raging in not too far a distant future. Therefore, he needed isolation in order that he may provide insulation to his disciples, that they may be able to endure what was soon to come to pass. And so notice in verse number 30. He says, and he came, verse 30, and they departed hence and passed through Galilee. And he would not that any man should know it. Now, the need was for a retreat. They needed to retreat. And so the reason for retreat was for private fellowship and specific instruction. So notice what he did. He departed that area where all the excitement of the transfiguration, of the healing, and as Jesus handled the crowd, he had to be able to do all of that kind of stuff. And so now, he had taken care of all that. See, Jesus, they could take care of business. See, the disciples couldn't handle their business. As soon as Jesus came off the mountain, what did he do? He began to take care of business. But even though he took care of business, he alone realized that he had some unfinished business. Oh, yes, he did. He had some unfinished business. And if he goes to the cross without properly preparing his disciples, they will lose it. So now there is some more urgent business that needs to be taken care of. Are you following me? He needed, therefore, some privacy. Everybody needs a little privacy. Everybody needs. But he needed privacy so he could engage in this intentional, intense teaching and preparation. Notice again, he said, the Bible said he passed through Galilee, helping us to understand that he was not going to Galilee just to be in Galilee. See, he had engaged in many wonderful works in Galilee. He had been through Galilee. But this visit was not like the previous visits. When he would go prior to this visit, as soon as he got to town, everybody would talk about Jesus in town. And everybody would come. But this time, he goes around the outskirts and he goes to and fro. He's trying to make sure that he remains incognito. He wants to remain inconspicuous. He doesn't want everybody to know. And so he was really moving about in secret, under stealth. And he wanted to spend quality time with just him and his disciples. He wanted to avoid the city, so he didn't tarry. Yeah. He was going. See, Galilee proved themselves to not be worthy of his ministry. Sometimes in life, you may recognize that there are those who prove themselves not to be worthy of ministry. Now, before we get too caught up in you, that's right. You and I, we are not worthy of Jesus' ministry. Hold on to that for a moment. The next time you size somebody else, before you will help, give a helping hand, before you begin to look at them as though they're so unrighteous, meaning you so self-righteous, none of us are deserving of divine supply that only God can give. Jesus helped us not because we were so great, no, but in spite of the fact that we weren't. He had to go to the cross. And so that became a launching point. And you may say, well, Jesus, now you're just spending so much time with your disciples, you don't have time for us. Well, let me just drop this on you. His concern for us necessitated that he withdraw from us and spend time with that select few, that we may benefit from that. His concern for the many meant he had to take special time for the few. Y'all get that? A helicopter landed in a war zone in Vietnam. And, the medics, they got off the helicopter and they saw all this mayhem. Total confusion. And they began running, trying to, take care of this person, and before you know it, the medics were so burnt out that they became ineffective. And they had to take those medics on back. And they brought in another helicopter with a medic team. And they got out, and you know what they did? Before they did anything, they kind of looked around and assessed the situation. And they dispatched a team. And the team's objective was, first of all, find the folk who are the least wounded. Now watch this. They found those who were least wounded. They helped them out. And they began to have those who were least wounded, who had not been patched up. They began to employ them to help them to gather others And they began to prioritize who needed the most attention now. Now they had and the more they healed up those who were less wounded, they employed them in the service. And before you know it, they now had a station set up where everybody had their needs being met. Sometimes when you see the shortness of the masses, you have to have a team. That's why Jesus had his 12 disciples. And now it's time, if the world is going to receive the benefit of the resurrection of Jesus, those 12 need to be equipped to spread the news. Are you feeling me? And so now they are brought in, and he's now giving them concentrated attention. And now he wants to drill into them the facts concerning his fate in Jerusalem, which is the death and the resurrection. Notice every time he mentions the death, they couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle it. That's what the Bible says when he talks about his death. The disciples were sorrowful. That's why he said, let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. And then he gave them the very mission and purpose for his departure. He said that I'm going to my Father's house, where, by the way, there are many mansions, or many dwelling places. I'm going to prepare a place for you. If I don't go, you can never get there. So there is purpose in this journey to Jerusalem. So number one, spiritual preparation requires time alone with Jesus. But number two, spiritual preparation requires that we are fat. Yeah, we got to gain some weight. We got to be fat. And that simply means we need to be faithful, available, and teachable. F-A-T. I just threw that in. People look at the Bible, we got to be fat. Yeah, faithful, available, and teachable. Now, he has them. They are available. Now we're going to find out just how teachable they are. Notice, if you will, verse number 31. It says, for he taught his disciples, and said unto them, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of men. And they shall kill him. And after that he is killed, he shall rise the third day. Amen. So if you truly want to be used by God to fulfill your Christian destiny, you must determine to become fat. Therefore, Jesus had to get them alone to fatten them up, to give them teaching that they could take with them into the turbulent times ahead. Notice the purpose for this approach. The Bible says, for he taught. That idea there is simply he engaged in continuous process of teaching. It was not a static, one-time Bible class. Right. So we need to be availing ourselves to the Spirit's teaching on a regular. You know, one Bible study a week just won't cut it. See, Jesus taught them, but he continuously taught them. It wasn't a seminar. He may give them a teaching, and then he may talk to this one brother here. And he began to share, and remind this brother about what they had talked about. And then over here, he may talk to 3 or 4 at the same time. And he may pull another one aside. And on and on. In other words, through this whole process, he was constantly drilling into them the very thing that he had already said. Don't you know that the Bible continues to remind us that Jesus kept on, the closer and the nearer he drew to the cross, the more frequent his conversation about his death and resurrection began to show up. Okay? Well, you may say, well, Jesus, why the redundancy? We already heard that. Obviously, Jesus recognized they heard it, So they didn't hear it. Someone said it's not your hearing that's the problem, it's your listening. Sometimes you can hear words, but you're not connecting. You're not connecting the dots. And you're still just as baffled. You can be still caught up in your old way of thinking, and you just go right over your head. Yeah, I get it. Right. So he continued to just drill down on them about the same thing over and over again, using different, methods, different, scenarios he would set up to make sure that they would get it. Continuously engaged in the teaching process. But then, not only did he engage in the continuous process, but he was, helping them to understand that this process of this approach was significant in that this. Well, that's what the Bible says. Not only did he engage in continuous teaching, but what more specifically is he teaching? He says, the Son of Man, notice what he says, is what? Delivered. That's the idea of being delivered. He speaks as though it's already happening. Now, the reason why that is significant is because Jesus does not want them to be taken by surprise. As though this is just something that just happened that Jesus was not aware of. And as far as Jesus was concerned, all of the death, burial, resurrection, all of that has already taken place. Yeah, I know See, Jesus knew that this was a determined and ordained plan of God. So Jesus was the lamb slain from before the foundation of the world. Right? We talk about that. But do we grasp that? Now, we're getting ready to actualize what had been prophesied. And even though we've talked about Isaiah, the suffering servant, all that kind of, but now we're coming face to face with that real reality of it taking place. And so understand that God delivered Jesus to be betrayed. Can you handle that? If he was indeed the lamb slain before the foundation of the world, it was the predetermined counsel of God that Jesus would suffer. So God delivered him. But not only did God deliver him, Christ delivered himself. But God so loved the world that he did what? He delivered him up. Right? Jesus said, you don't take my life. He said, I lay my life down. And if I lay my life down, I can take it up again. So Jesus, Christ himself, delivered himself up to be crucified. In other words, he was willing to fulfill God's plan. It wasn't that he got arrested, he tried to get away, they called up with him, he was running, they tackled him, and no. He couldn't get away, he had an escape route. No. Christ delivered himself to be crucified. Notice, Judas betrayed. Notice he'd given instruction to Judas, who would eventually rat him out. But it's bigger than Judas. Pilate pronounced sentence, but it's bigger than Pilate. The crowd said, give us Barabbas, but it's bigger than the crowd. It was in the mind of God. It was the cooperation of Christ himself. His disciples would betray him, helping us to understand they still couldn't get it. Notice the power, even in the method of his teaching, the power of repetition. He restates what had already been stated over and over again. But now, as he states it, he's becoming more and more graphic. They will still think, is he speaking figuratively? Sure. Or is he speaking literally? Yeah, now he's using, he's all the gloves are off now. Bare bones, knuckle to knuckle. And they're now debating, reinforced that his dying, he was dying as a willing sacrifice versus some hopeless martyr who got caught. We wanted to stress that he was dying to redeem man according to God's will. He was the satisfactory sacrifice. He was a willing sacrifice. He was like a sheep led to slaughter. A sheep is a domesticated animal. Notice, sheep is a vegetarian, right? Right? Right. There are certain animals that are carnivores. And there are certain animals that are herbivores, I guess. Right? See, there are some animals who live by the fact that they take the life of another. Right? The lamb is not one whose life is dependent on someone else's death. He's a domesticated animal. In other words, he is not one who has to be captured in the wild. Jesus was not captured. His life was not predicated on taking the life of somebody else. He was a domestic. Get my figurative analogy here. He was not one who got caught and who got hunted down like a wild beast of prey. But rather, he was one who was silent. No resistance. He gave his life. You can't take my life. I can give it. See, he speaks as though it's already done. Because it was determined and agreed upon that he should suffer, that he should die. And he had to teach them intentionally about the events that were to come. So when they happen, it's even more and greater confirmation that Jesus surely was the Son of God. Yeah. Notice, number 3. Spiritual preparation allowed us to receive the word by faith. I told you a story a long time ago about me coming face to face with the reality that there was a Santa Claus. Remember that? Mm-hmm. I told you that before. I talked about what Santa Claus brought me for Christmas in kindergarten or whatever. And then one of the kids on the playground told me, there ain't no such thing as Santa Claus. And I guess he just found out a week ago. And so we arguing, and because behind that statement was another reality that I was not prepared to face. Because he had called my mama a liar. Because mama's the one who said, "Oh boy, you're not going to go to bed, or Santa Claus ain't going to come." It's kind of like take this stick and knock it off my shoulder kind of thing, right? Some of y'all don't. How do y'all? Some of you guys know what I'm talking about. And so, because I have received the untruth for so long, I could not bring myself to admit that what I had embraced was not the truth. These disciples had been with Jesus a short period of time. In comparison to their whole life, it's been drilled into them that the Messiah is going to come and set up his kingdom. And he's going to rule and reign on the earth. He's going to reestablish the grandeur of Israel. And so, Jesus, as he operates, in all of his operation and all the things that are going on, points to the fact that he is indeed the Messiah. And they say, yes, let's do this. And he said, now we're going to do it. I'm going to die. Do they matter? How are you going to set up your kingdom if you're not here? How are you going to fulfill all of the hopes, dreams, and aspirations that we have in the Messiah if you're gone? Right. We just assume that you're more powerful than those who are going to lay hands on you. That's right. We just had help us, I'm not getting it. That's what Peter said, I'm not going to let this happen. He said, get behind me, Satan. He called him Satan. Can you imagine if someone called you the devil? You're going to let the devil show up come out of you. Yeah. I knew you was broke my heart. The verse reminds us that it's hard to accept truth when one's entire life is based upon faulty understanding. It's easier to reject that which is too difficult to accept. And they're at the very crucible. They're at the very crossroads now of fully embracing the role of God's view of the Messiah. And they couldn't have it. They couldn't have it. How do we know that? Well, let's take a glimpse at verse 32, and then the lesson will be yours. And verse 32 says, but they understood not that saying, and were afraid to ask. We don't want to happen to us what just happened to Peter. Yeah, we done got rebuked already. We don't want to happen to us what happened when we couldn't cast that demon out. We got fronted in front of everybody. He didn't say anything to them when he did on faithful generation. But when he did what they couldn't do, everybody saw the boy, they looked at the dad, they looked at Jesus, and then they looked at the disciples. So now, as Jesus is saying these things, they didn't understand it, and they begin to wonder within themselves, again, is it figurative or is it literal? What's going on? Yeah. But they were afraid to ask. Yeah. You see, they supposed this saying again was maybe some mystical or figurative meaning versus the literal. They could not reconcile the great Messiah's death if he were to set up his kingdom. They did not understand because they did not want to understand that their Messiah would be killed. Our hero, our champion, the one that we have really looked up. You know what I was a Muhammad Ali fan. Oh yeah, big time. And he was the greatest and all that kind of stuff, right? But then a tragic thing happened. He fought Larry Holmes. At this time, Ali was just a shell of what he used to be. And he had to fight Larry Holmes in his prime. And Ali was an old man. He's up there trying to stand up there and just getting beat up. And my heart I couldn't handle it. That was my hero, in boxing. And he was getting pulverized. And Larry Holmes didn't want to keep on fighting. Larry Holmes went to his tent afterwards. He went to his room. He said, "Champ, don't get back in the ring. He said, if you need money, I'll give you money." It broke Larry Holmes' heart. Because he was a man. Sometimes things happen that it's just too much to bear. And so now, they did not want to understand how the Messiah, the one who Israel has been long awaiting, would now have to die like this. So they persisted in their fleshly desires, and they spiritualized what he had said. They were afraid to go any further. So the pivotal time of preparation. See, in other words, they heard him, but for some reason, they couldn't hear him. They couldn't. It was just too much. And they wouldn't even go any further. They just kind of, assumed and kept walking, kept on going like they got it. Playing like they got it. This was a pivotal time of preparation. It was necessary to equip them for what awaited them. So therefore, we must take full advantage of the season of preparation. We need to prepare ourselves because there's some things that get ready to jump off in your life. Even in like this church. And God wants us to be prepared. Because there's no excuse for us to go into face the challenges that lie ahead without the assurance and confidence that God's got us.
Amen.
He's got you.
Amen.
The problem is sometimes we don't believe. There are so many blessings that God wants to do and to give you. See, Your new tomorrow starts today. Understand that the blessings that he wants to give you today are not for today. They're for tomorrow. Amen. But if you don't get it today, you won't be able to step into your tomorrow with confidence, with certainty that God is going to make everything all right. So he is calling on Line Street and you individually to begin to reassess how you hear. Do you hear without listening? And are you listening based on your preconceived notion of who and what the Messiah is all about? They missed it because we've been with you 3 years and I know you've been doing a lot of stuff, but we have grown up all our lives with a certain notion of who Christ is. Now you just burst out bubble. If you're here today, I want you to get this. Just 3 short verses. These are the verses we hurry up and read so we can get to the next point. But I want you to settle in on this, that you may evaluate how much you are availing yourself to in-depth, intensive teaching and preparation today, that you can be a shining star for Jesus tomorrow. Amen. If you're not a member of the body of Christ, understand that your first step is obedience of faith. I didn't say saying, yeah, I believe Jesus Christ is God. I get that. But the obedience of faith is the declaration of faith. The disobedience of faith simply means no faith. Believe in Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. And his whole coming was for the purpose of going. He came to earth to go to the cross. Then when he goes back above, he can go back to get you and take you where he is. If you want to go to him, you want to be with him. It starts by the way of the gospel. Hear, believe, repent, confess, and be baptized for the remission of your sins. And pursue the family of God. But more importantly, to us who are members of the body of Christ, how intense is your heart in following Jesus? This is your time of preparation. And it starts by saying, you know what, I realize that I have not been what I need to be. So therefore God has not been able to do in and through me what he wants to do. Because I have not made myself faithful, available, and teachable. Think about that together. We stand and say something.